How are you today? How's that feeling? Yes?
Let's see some day three energy.
How was that? Last 3 days? All right, great. Okay, I want to start with a little show of hands, okay? Who here met at least one person with whom you're going to follow up in the next week or so? Okay, 2?
100%.
How about between 5 and 10 people you were like, okay, wow. Okay, that's really good. And how about 15 to 20 people that you think, okay, great, okay, we have some power networkers here, that's amazing. I really hope that this was as meaningful to you as it was for me. I think that many people have come up and said, what an incredible lineup, what an incredible curation. And I have to say, I gotta take a step back and give all the credit to the incredible team that put it together. But most importantly, and very few people know about this, we have a content curating council for each single track. All of these experts lend their expertise, their networks, their knowledge to help us curate the incredible content here at SOCAP. So I wanted to let you know that that credit is very much shared and it's very community driven. Mm-hmm. So with that, I wanted to ask about highlights. Everyone has been talking about highlights. I'd love to hear about my friend Hannah's highlights.
Well, to me, that was quite the SOCAP. Speaking about going deeper, the land ceremony made me shiver. Thank you, Greg Castro, Kelly White, and Manari. Yes, every business conversation needs to carry medicine and be centered around Earth. The OG spoke of at the opening plenary. I heard Salim Ismail share a vision of technology that embraces feminine leadership. I don't know about you, but I really like that.
Yes.
Christiana Figueres spoke about alignment when it comes to climate investment, and she made me really curious about her retreats, which I know you've attended, Michelle.
Yes.
Tracks were buzzing. Who here went to a session at the Catalytic Philanthropy track? Yeah, so this track challenged us to rethink giving. AI as accelerating impact explored what should be at the core of technology, social change. Deploying capital, climate capital had us planning our regenerative futures, transforming health systems, a practical call to action for health equity. We reimagined education through learning and capital, and food through regenerative food systems, and we made it clear that diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging is not out of fashion, it is here to last. We had about 100 sessions, and it's not over. What was your favorite part, Katie?
I told you all during the opening that Manari's words from the land ceremony would stick with me through the entire 3 days, that every conversation and every word we speak should have healing at its core, healing for the earth, and when we bring healing to the earth, we'll bring healing to ourselves. I kept that in my mind this week, and I know that you all did too, because I felt it in the conversations I had. I had productive, deal-making, business-making conversations, but at their core was a community of healing. And that was an incredibly powerful experience for me. I hope it was for each of you. But when you ask about my favorite part, Hannah, my favorite part might be yet to come. Ooh. As we gather for the closing plenary, it's my honor to introduce Jim Sorensen, a personal friend and colleague of mine, a trailblazing entrepreneur and CEO. Jim is one of the world's foremost impact business practitioners. He's not only building companies, but also entire industries, creating tens of thousands of jobs. From transforming lives with Sorensen Communications to spearheading impact investing through the Sorensen Impact Foundation, Jim exemplifies how to align purpose with profit. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to the visionary leader who inspires us all, Jim Sorensen.
Thank you, Katie. This is awesome. What a great convening, what a great opportunity to meet again. I've been going to SOCAP for probably more than a decade now, And I'm never disappointed, but each year we build upon what we learned from the years before. And hopefully you felt that in your engagements, in the content that was curated, in the collaborations that you've been able to build with each other. And hopefully, there will be deals and mutual organizations that come together as a result of the great meeting and the opportunity that we have to be together here. I'm so grateful to Katie and to so many that have put on this conference. And I think we ought to give them a shout out of thanks for the great work that they've done in producing, I think, another great event. I've really enjoyed the excitement, the really mutual learning, and really, I think the new associations that I've been able to engage in here while at SOCAP, and hopefully you've been able to have that same kind of experience. I want to let you know how important this group is to really going deeper in catalyzing systems change. This is where it all really can begin and needs to be built in each of your communities in really all parts of the world. And we hope that we can be a part of helping that to build into much greater depth and an ecosystem of change. Again, I want to thank you all for being here. It's really my honor to be associated with each of you in this great cause. Thank you.
Hello again. I am honored to introduce Carol Ann Hilton, a powerhouse of indigenous economic innovation whose leadership through the Indigenomics Institute and Global Indigenous Technology House is redefining global business. As an award-winning author and advisor to some of the world's most influential organizations, she has championed indigenous voices at the economic table, creating pathways for generational impact. Carol Ann, please come to stage. Let's give a warm welcome to Carol Ann. Carol Ann, I'm excited to tell you I'm actually moving to Vancouver, or close to Victoria, the land of your ancestors, the Nuu-chah-nulth from the Heshka Nation. I'm especially thrilled to meet a leader whose roots and work are so deeply connected to the land that I will soon call home. Thank you so much, Carol Ann.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
My Nuu-chah-nulth name is Wakatush, which means big sister. In bringing focus to this time and space that we meet here today, I wanted to bring our attention to the traditional language of this place, because the traditional language of this place exists in some form unbroken across realities, and that language holds the space, it holds the vibration of the teachings of the land, it holds the space of the teachings to be in alignment with what it means to be human. It doesn't hold the specificity of being indigenous, it holds the specificity of being human. That is the importance of indigenous languages. I want to acknowledge the original language of this place as it upholds the vibration of the land. I want to acknowledge the traditional ceremonies of this place because it upholds the teachings of how to be here and to be responsible. What we attain within the concept of sustainability, what we retain within the concept of impact exists within indigenous languages. And it's within that I wanted to be able to introduce the concept of indigenomics. Do I have a story for you? From a hashtag to a global movement. To be able to understand that the landing and the conceptual development of indigenomics as a concept, to take two words and use the technological advancement of a hashtag to build a value stream of a series of stories and experience of life, and sustainability, and indigeneity. From that time to building a global movement, I wanted to talk to you today about the concept of indigenomics and the evolution of it across time. The concept of indigenomics is future-pacing the story of Indigenous economic power through a forward-looking target and restoring the concept of Indigenous prosperity by driving a national and international economic narrative to amplify positive action, leadership, and outcomes. Indigenous economic power is the creation of space at the economic table that is about expanding economic opportunities, driving support for Indigenous businesses, while advancing the development of partnerships for expanded market access and sustainable business development. To be able to bring focus to this concept, I describe it as modern, constructive, generative, Indigenous economic design. To be able to bring Indigenous perspectives using the tool of business and economy as constructive and generative tools that advance our ways of being and our ability to design from our Indigenous worldview. Indigenomics is about disrupting the existing narrative of what we've been told economy is. Indigenous economies have been successful for thousands of years. The concept specifically, as it's advanced within the Canadian context, is developing a forward-looking trajectory, naming the rise of Indigenous economic power through the emergence of a $100 billion annual Indigenous economy. This past week, we developed a report that identified what $100 billion of Indigenous economic activity looked like. But what is important to understand that our people, my parents, my grandparents, are survivors of the residential school system. To understand that this is being done in this generation, and while the success of this generation has been built on the success of thousands of years of economic teachings that bring forward why we do business, how we do business, and the purpose that that is in the context that that's created within. So I'm going to share with you a little bit about from the development of a hashtag towards a global movement. Last week, we delivered the second annual Indigenomics on Bay Street event. As a national Indigenous economic forum, it's an invitation for changemakers, innovators, leadership across corporate Canada, the financial sector, governments, and Indigenous businesses to bring focus, meaning, and visibility to the strength of the Indigenous economy, while building bridges for impactful outcomes in economic reconciliation. To be able to bring forward into the heart of the financial sector a story of Indigenous economic power, a story of Indigenous business sustainable leadership. Last week, we launched Indigenomics AI, an Indigenous economic intelligence tool built from an Indigenous worldview. To be able to build an Indigenous economic intelligence tool that will analyze financial, regulatory data and align Indigenous economic values with measurable action, insights for decision-making, and capital deployment objectives within the Indigenous economy. Indigenomics is an invitation. The question, who wants to play Indigenomics? The invitation to come and be present in economic reconciliation, to address the truths of our past, and to be comfortable with the truths of the present and the truths of our future, which is about Indigenous participation and inclusion. The Indigenomics AI, one of the first market innovations from this engine, is the development of an Indigenomics North Star Index, the creation of an Indigenous index for advancing Indigenous economic growth and reconciliation within the capital markets to accelerate capital velocity and to drive market demand. The concept of Indigenomics is bringing into focus the significance and importance of Indigenous people within an AI system that allows the space for our worldview, that uses the space for the way that we understand and operate within the world, and also within the current, the historical, and the future context. We're launching what's called Indigenomics Impact. It'll be in April 2025. It'll be 100 stories of Indigenous economic reconciliation impact, using the Indigenomics AI system to advance the stories, to develop data, and to build a digital platform that recognizes the leadership in the Indigenous economy and who is leading in reconciliation, bringing visibility to that story and the response to the rise of the Indigenous economic economy today. In 2 weeks, we're delivering Indigenomics Now. It's established as a space for modern Indigenous economic design that's built on the foundation of the concept, life at the center. It will serve as a design platform to create the space for unique and diverse Indigenous voices upholding Indigenous economic worldview. The concept is highlighting Indigenous economic knowledge systems. It's a global Indigenous economic design platform for connecting and engaging and upholding, while highlighting Indigenous sustainable economic leadership. It's about upholding Indigenous economic worldview, which for hundreds and hundreds of years has been denied. The concept of Indigenomics Now and the visual demonstration of a lightning bolt to be able to understand that concept and the experience of the shakeup of an economic system that is not serving the well-being of humanity or of the earth itself. It's time to shake that up. The concept of life at the center, how do we measure the proximity of our actions and our outcomes? In Indigenous worldview, the concepts and the lived realities of accountability to our past, to ourselves, and to our future. To build the metrics and to design a system that advances this concept, to measure what matters, to actually understand what impact is, to look at our business models and call to account what is the proximity of our business model to life at the center. It is time to return to life at the center of what actual economy is and which is built into Indigenous worldview. The concept of Indigenomics Now is to return economy to natural systems. We built the agenda around 13 moons and 13 streams of content. These 13 streams of content to align with the natural law, to align with the natural world. To build a stage that is reflective, responsive, and adaptive, to look at that from the perspective of 4 directions, 4 elements, 4 grandparents, and all of the aspects that is embedded with Indigenous worldview, that the alignment of natural law with economy means, and how do we build economy with life at the center. The next aspect that we're building is a global Indigenous technology house. Our intention here is to build strong, creative, and dynamic outcomes rooted in immersive technology that supports an increase in the visibility and experience of Indigenous worldview, stories, knowledge systems, and ways of being through the application of integrated global technology through music, film, and interactive experience. We would love to see you here next year with the Global Indigenous Technology House. It is advancing a global ecosystem to foster immersive experience centered in Indigenous wisdom, which when synergized with advancing technology such as AI and spatial computing, promises to produce compelling, transformative, and inclusive storytelling experiences for humanity. To bring this into focus and to realize the potential of the rise of Indigenous economy, of Indigenous peoples taking our seat at the economic table, is the beautiful expression, we are a powerful people. So in all the spaces and all the structures that were denied to us as people across time, it's in the darkest shadows, in the survival of residential school survivors. It is in this space that we pick up the tool of business and we hold our future clearly in sight with our responsibility to ourselves, to each other, to the earth, and to our future clearly in our sight. This is our response. The response to be able to understand and have clearly our responsibility of what impact means, to be able to bring into focus the story of now and what is the collective response that we are building. This is going to take courage. The invitation is, who wants to play Indigenomics? Let's all have impact, and let's have the courage to do this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. And thank you for inviting us to be more courageous as we build an economy with life at the center. I can definitely take on that challenge. I don't know if I can succeed alone. Will you? Friends, our next guest has kayaked from Cuba to Florida with a group of entrepreneurs. I know I cannot say I have done that. Stefan Jacob, co-founder and chief global officer at Cotopaxi, is here to share how he's built an impact-driven brand that blends adventure, sustainability, and social good, taking on industry giants while driving Cotopaxi to hundreds of millions of revenue and with a mission to fight poverty globally. Coincidentally, I live only 2 hours away from the Cotopaxi volcano, which inspired this beautiful brand. Friends, please join me in welcoming Stefan Jacob to stage.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me here. So we'll start out with a little exercise, life reflection, if you will. I often do this in real time, but you can follow along if you have a piece of paper, or you can do this on your phone. These are dimensions of life that we try to optimize for, and these will be different for every single one of us. For me, I put health up front. I put family next. We have service to others on this dimension. We'll then jump down to friendships, relationships. Cotopaxi career is one of those dimensions. Travel, adventure, and eventually education, reading, just becoming more knowledgeable intellectually. And then you can say, okay, at the center is a 0, and then you say, okay, you can go up to a 10, and you can start to sketch out where you are. And there are different ways to do that. We'll start with 2023, which is a reflection on last year. Where was I at that point? Health was bad, family great, service okay, friendships, relationships okay, career was going well, great travel, a great adventure, a couple of stranding myself on an island for survival adventures. And then you connect these and you get to a radar chart, if you will, of what your life looks like at the time. And then you can juxtapose that to a different time frame. You can say, okay, let's look at today. How have these dimensions changed? Significant improvement on health. Family took a bit of a hit. Friendships was okay. Service to others has actually improved. And then you sketch, you combine these dots and get a fresh picture of where you're at. Now, the question is, can you get to a perfect 10 across the board? Can you create sort of that perfect circle in your life? And I think you can do this exercise as an individual. You can do it as a family, which we've done. We took the letters of our last name, turned that into family values, and are doing this exercise. And then, of course, you can do that as an organization. And as I reflect over these we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary as Cotopaxi. As I reflect over those 10 years, I think there are different stages, right? The early days, which we'll look at first, the blue line, it all started with why we started this brand in the first place. In 2004, I was working for a nonprofit organization that was dedicated to the elimination of child labor on the Indonesian archipelago. And that was a really wonderful experience, impactful in the sense that we took several hundred kids from fishing platforms and factories, human trafficking type situations back into their communities, into their schools, worked with local and municipal and federal government to pass anti-child labor legislation, really impactful in the sense, but also really eye-opening, right? I'm from Germany originally, so I grew up in an environment where I didn't have to worry about shelter and healthcare and education. It was just given, it was handed to me. And these kids and their families were born, as is the reality for a large, I know I'm preaching to the choir, for a large percentage of the world population were simply born in a hard place, where that was not the reality, and they had to make really hard choices. And that's at the core of why we started Cotopaxi in the first place. My co-founder had very similar experiences in Latin America, and we felt strongly, right, that we wanted to take advantage of the sheer luck of the draw, no merit of our own, of where we were born, and built an organization around the notion of recognizing that talent and aspiration and love is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. And so that allowed us, or that led us to this idea of building a human-centered brand that connects, adventurers who seek that sort of discovery and connection through travel, and find ways to create these super fans around this notion of, doing good. And we'll play a little video. This was we held these events in the early days. It was called the Questival. It's a 24-hour outdoor adventure race. We built an app around it that guided people through the experience. They had several challenges to choose from that would expose them to the values that we as a brand stand for. And this was the kickoff. It's over 4,000, millennial Gen Zs all wearing our backpacks, and we're swearing them in to do good over that 24-hour period.
Good, do, good, do, good. A little bit louder. Good, start rising up. Good, do, good.
Yeah, it still gives me goosebumps when I see this video, like being on stage and seeing that tremendous enthusiasm around the notion of doing good, and sort of creating that movement around that has been really, really rewarding as we're building this brand. Also, in those early years, we laid the foundation for a very circular approach to building product. We recognize that there's a tremendous amount of waste in the, for sure, fashion supply chain. Same holds true for gear. The factory in the Philippines that we were working with, whole warehouses full of excess material. Nothing wrong with it. Perfect, beautiful material, just small rolls left over from bulk production runs from various brands. So we came up with a system to basically empower the sewers to make the design decisions themselves instead of us exactly speccing what material, what fabric goes where. We let them decide based on the availability of that dead stock, and turn that into a beautiful line of product that was sort of like this amazing example of win-win-win, right? We're helping to reduce the dead stock in the supply chain. We're up-leveling the creativity of these sewers, and since it's trash in the eyes of the factory, really, really strong gross margin. So it's just a beautiful sort of foundation for a much more circular approach to product design and development. What we didn't have in the early days, I pulled this from a board meeting, board deck. We didn't have profits. We were burning $300,000, $400,000 in the early years, in the early months, right? This was about a year after we started, and the only reason we could do that was that we were able to bring in investors and partners that believed in us. And then success came, right? We grew tremendously, 70% CAGR. COVID was an absolute boost for the outdoor industry, 90% growth in 2022. Amazing enthusiasm in terms of NPS score. We built out through the Cotopaxi Foundation our impact program. We're able to donate significant amounts to our in-country partners, and we're able to build the team, attracted some fantastic partners such as Kirsten Green here from 401 Ventures in San Francisco, and Ellie Wheeler, and Lauren Iverson, and Brooke and Cecilia from Bain Capital, who's still on our board today. And we're able to build out a tremendous team. So we're doing really well on all these dimensions. It was sort of the golden days, right, in terms of building a very robust circular impact program on what we call our 3 Rs for all our product. 98% of our products are either repurposed, recycled, or responsibly sourced. And then through the foundation, we're having these tremendous impact. So that was sort of, it felt like we did have it all, right, during those years. That's the red curve. And then 2023 happened. The industry, like most consumer industries, post-COVID, over-inventoried, interest rates, inflation, significantly depressed consumer spending, and the industry hit a wall hard. We had millions of dollars of product on the boat, en route to our key accounts, and they just canceled these orders. And so it was a hard reality, and this was tough, like as a founder, to go through. We had built the infrastructure to support 70 to 90% growth, and then suddenly it stalled, right? And we had to make some really, really hard decisions. And we got some of them right on that people dimension, but we also screwed up on some. And so that was hard. We lost some of sort of the magic. We always wanted Cotopaxi to be a highlight in people's career. And it was a hard time as we went through that and had to build that muscle to adjust to that reality. And so that begs the question, okay, so is he right? Like the Chicago School of Thought, stop worrying about impact, right? Like focus on making money and then distribute these profits and let your shareholders deal with the humanitarian aspect. And in a situation like that, right, it's easy to say like this is actually the maxim that you should operate under, but we felt strongly that was not the right approach. I'm sorry, this is a little small. In 2023 was the first year that we weren't profitable in several years. And yet we gave, and 2/3 of that loss was actually due to the money that we gave to our foundation of $1.5 million. And that's because we felt so strongly that that's who we are. That dimension, that purpose, circularity, and sustainability, that's who we are as a brand. If we give that up, who are we, right? We sort of lose our identity. And we doubled down on circularity. This was a program that we just launched a couple of months ago called Renovo, where we took our own dead stock from insulated outerwear, returns, damaged, blemished product, as well as fleece products, and turned it into a new product working together with Portland Garment Factory in a fashionable line of product that actually flew off the shelf, sold out within 36 hours, that entire line. And so we despite the challenges that we faced from an economic perspective, we doubled down on sort of these core brand purposes. And the reason we do that is that the work's not done, right? I mean, we've made tremendous progress. And again, I know many in the room here, you work with these numbers every day, right? If you compare over the last 200 years, the percentage of the world population living under $2.15 in inflation-adjusted dollars went from over close to 80%, right, of the world population living under extreme poverty to drop below single digits for the first time around, in the 2010s. But it's been remarkably stable since then. Unfortunately, we have not seen progress over the last 5 to 10 years. COVID actually made it worse. New infection rates around malaria and tuberculosis have actually stalled. The development has been very unevenly distributed. Yes, we've lifted billions of people out of poverty, but there's pockets in sub-Saharan Africa and in South America that are persistently poor. And so the work's not done, and we feel that responsibility, and that's why we hold on to those principles despite sort of these economic challenges. And so that takes me back, right? Can you have it all? In 2021, my brother was diagnosed with an aneurysm on his aortic root. It was deemed at risk of immediate rupture, so he was rushed into open heart surgery. He did great, everything went well, and he's fine, but since there's a significant genetic component to that condition, I was tested too, and no surprise, I have a dilated aortic root as well. And so my doctor told me, okay, you have to watch your, hypertension makes it worse, increases the risk of an aneurysm, and you have to watch your blood pressure hawkishly. At the time, I was overweight, under-exercised, focused on work way too much. And he said, okay, you got to start blood pressure medication, right? And so I sat there, and I was looking at that little pill and can say, okay, I can now take this for the rest of my life for a condition that is 100% linked to my lifestyle choices, or I can do something about it. And so made a significant change, switched to a largely plant-based diet, lost about 70 pounds, and all the health markers improved and sort of took care of that. That also meant that this summer, my parents who still live in Germany, my mom is a wonderful, wonderful chef and cook. Amazing German food, Mediterranean, Middle Eastern. So I had to call her and say, Mom, I'm going to reject most of your cooking from henceforth. She was not happy about that. She expresses love through food. We as a family, we come together through culinary experiences. And so that's why I dropped on the family richness, right? That dropped. Travel is the same thing. When I travel, I love to explore local cuisines and fully embrace anything that's being served. And so I don't do that anymore. And so that's why that dropped a little bit. And so the question, can you have it all? I think the answer is no. Probably not all, and not all at the same time. And you know what? Good. I think in those choices that we make, we identify and we can reflect on what's most important to us, and that makes for rich stories, right? So as I meet with you all after this, later on and during the conference, those are the kind of conversations that I want to have. What are the peaks that you're optimizing for? What are the valleys that you had to create as you make these compromises? And so I think that's not a bad thing, that's a good thing. And I think the same holds true as a brand. As we make these choices as organizations, as brands, that's sort of what shows who we are, what we stand for. And I think that's the reason why we as Cotopaxi, we continue to see 10 years in tremendous growth, right? We see an attraction of a much more diverse consumer base in terms of 60% of our consumers being female, about 55% of our consumer base being non-white, ethnically diverse. over 85% of our consumers under the age of 45 in an industry that's predominantly white, that's predominantly male, and that's aging. Average customer that walks in an REI is about 55 years old. And so that's my hope for all of us, here, that we don't lament the choices that we have to make, the trade-offs that we have to make individually and in our organizations, but we recognize them as an opportunity to really get crystal on what matters most to us, of who we are, and then recognize the richness that comes with those choices and the stories that ensue from it. So I'll close here. Thank you again for having me.
What a practical admission. Maybe we can't have it all, at least not all at the same time. I love that, alongside another incredible example of the charge that Anthony Bug-Levine gave us during the opening plenary to turn our inspiration into action. And you heard that from Stefan just then. Michelle, were you inspired by Stefan's talk?
I would say a little bit. I had to go, I ran out and grabbed the first Cotopaxi fleece I could find, really. I mean, it's such an inspiring brand, and of course, it's such an inspiring set of people and founders.
Amazing. Well, it wouldn't be 2024 at a conference if we weren't talking about AI, right? We're going to lock the doors and not let anyone out until we talk about AI. We're really excited to have an amazing panel with us today to walk us through the details of AI ethics.
And well, as our first guest, it is my absolute pleasure, and maybe we'll come over here a little bit. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Paula Goldman. She is the first ever Chief Ethical and Humane Use Officer at Salesforce. Paula is leading the charge in building a framework for ethical technology that prioritizes social good. With a rich background spanning impact investing at a mid-year network, so she is part of the SOCAP family. She's our insert into the corporate world, for sure. Paula has been a trailblazer in aligning tech with human values. Please join me again in welcoming Paula Goldman.
Thank you.
Joining Paula, I have the honor to introduce Mutale Nkonde, a visionary at the intersection of technology, policy, and racial justice. As the founder of AI for the People and a key advocate behind the Algorithmic Accountability Act, Mutale is shaping the future of responsible AI. From testifying before Congress to advising civil society leaders, Mutale is driving critical conversations about the ethical use of technology, and you're about to witness one.
And it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Ravit Dotan. Come on out. Who is a leading AI ethics advisor and researcher dedicated to helping tech companies, investors, and other professionals develop responsible AI strategies. Ravit is a sought-after expert whose insights have been featured in publications like the New York Times and TechCrunch. Ravit is also developing a new habit of bird watching at home, a new hobby, and she is nerdily excited about attracting woodpeckers back to her yard, a little local example of biodiversity restoration. Come ask her about it afterwards. Please welcome our panel. Oh, sorry. No, don't welcome our panel yet. Welcome our moderator.
Absolutely. And last but not least, moderating our panel today, we have Seth Cohen. Please. Seth is the Chief Impact Officer at Forbes. With 20 years of experience at the intersection of philanthropy, business, and social impact, Seth has worked with some of the world's top foundations and media brands to bring about positive change. One of the things that you don't know about Seth is that he also has a side business called Nacho Dots, which you can ask him about after the party, please. Seth, the floor and the panelists are yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So, hi everybody. First, before we even start, I want to acknowledge that I have been able to moderate a lot of panels over the past few years at Forbes, And some of those panels have also been on AI, and it is a true pleasure to be on an all-women panel focused on AI. So kudos to the SOCAP team. They've really done a great job at this conference, making sure there's been representation. And I'm glad that I'm outnumbered 3-1 right now. But check with me afterwards if I'm still glad. So I can't see everybody, but I want to ask one quick question. How many of you all have had a conversation about AI over the past 3 days? If you could raise your hands. Okay, it looks like to me about everybody or most people. Yeah. How many of you feel like you have a really good handle on the mental frameworks and the mental maps of how you're going to apply what you've learned to AI, about AI in the future? Raise your hands. Okay, well, that's our goal right now, ladies. That's our goal. So I really want to get into, I think, some of the conversations about mental models and frameworks, because I think people have heard a lot over the past few days, and maybe it's all kind of a little mixed up like pasta primavera in their head. So our job for the next 20 minutes or so is to maybe help them understand and think about different ways from the perspective of 3 areas of the opportunity that exists for people in this room around AI and investing in organizations and NGOs and impact entrepreneurs that are really using this technology in powerful ways. That we're going to talk about the equity and accessibility of it, and then the ethical considerations. And I know all of those mix up together, so I'm hoping we're all going to just have a conversation, and I'm going to try and stay out of the way. So maybe I'll start with you, Mutale. If we could, maybe how should we think about the broadest opportunity for AI to really address the broadest social needs and the broadest kind of calling for change on a societal and a global level? Size this for us in the potential impact frame.
Yeah, so thank you for that, and hello, everybody. I think the thing that we need to do first is really have a clear idea in our mind in terms of what AI systems can do and what AI systems cannot do. So thinking about AI systems as knowledge systems that can sort information in certain use cases, they can make decisions. The things that they can't do is make us more human. The things that they can't do is make high-stakes decisions about people who have groups of populations whose historic data has encoded them already from a deficit frame. So, for example, one of the use cases that I always bring up is the campus algorithm and the investigation that ProPublica did on them in 2016. And what they did was use historical data around recidivism to develop an AI system that would decide who stayed in jail and who went home. Surprise, surprise. The black defendants were remanded at higher rates than the white defendants, even though they had the same profile, even though they'd done the same crimes, because the underlying data was encoded in these assumptions of black criminality. That's a really good example of putting an AI system in as a moral agent. Where I think the opportunities really lie, and if we look at the Nobel Prizes that have just been announced, are in systems where we need to ignite the imagination and look for the possible. So the founder of DeepMind got a Nobel Prize in physics this last time because what they were doing using AI was looking at new configurations of proteins that will, once applied, help us really think through big issues like cures for cancer, cures for other diseases that are impacting, again, these use cases. So I think once we realize that there has to be not just a human in the loop, but a human who wants to use their time, talent, and treasure to fix our biggest problems, that's where your real opportunities for AI lie.
Thank you. It's really helpful, and I know that double-clicking on this humanity on both kind of how it engages and responds to it. I see you, Paul, nodding throughout Mutale's comments. Tell me from your vantage point, obviously a premier leader in technology in the world, you're grappling with some of these issues every day, and how are you seeing the technology of AI create more accessibility or create that greater potential to recognize the humanity that we should be of greater service to?
Yeah, first of all, it's such a wonderful privilege to be back at SOCAP. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. I also, I really loved what you said, and I want to build on it. So we have this philosophy at Salesforce that we call human at the helm, right? So in technology circles, we talk a little bit about human in the loop, about a person checking AI. But you said something really important, which is it starts with knowing what AI is good for and what it's not good for, and what it can't do, including some of the use cases that you cited, is also things like it can help coach us about how we can be better to each other. But ultimately, technology has to be in service of human potential. And that's not just for AI, that's for all technology, right? But that is not a foregone conclusion. So what I spend my day doing every day is thinking about agentic AI systems in the workplace and thinking about how the way we do work is changing so rapidly because AI is transforming from a deterministic tool to really a partner that we're going to be delegating significant things to. And we have to be very, very wise about what we delegate and what we don't delegate. And we have to be very clear about the governance systems that are built into the technology and on top of the technology and in our government around those choices so that the people remain the center of the transformation, that they're not a subject of the transformation. The transformation is in service of people. And that's what we mean by human at the helm.
Yeah, I really love that. It's because there does become this fetishism or this, and we were talking a bit backstage about the dream solutions that these create. But when we get too wrapped up in the technology, we can also lose that center of humanity. Right. And you said humans at the helm.
Yeah.
I really love that. So Ravit, I want to come to you because one of the conversations that I had over the past few days was with an investor, someone who's allocating capital, and thinking to myself, well, I've got my investment thesis. There's all these big questions that are going on. How do I align, maybe that word is too on the nose, but how do I align my thesis, my investment thesis, with also some of these ethical considerations that we were just discussing?
Yeah, this is such a great question to raise specifically at a conference like SOCAP, because I think a lot of people might think of AI as a separate topic. I have my investment thesis, and then also there's AI and AI ethics, right? And it can feel like almost an add-on, right? And it can feel like a chore. Oh no, another thing, right? We had climate, now we have this.
It's like it's just the next thing that we have to figure out.
But I encourage people to think about this differently. So I wouldn't think of AI responsibility or even AI as an add-on, right? If you do already have an investment thesis that is engaged in social impact in some way, it just pertains to AI responsibility by the nature of it, right? So for example, suppose you already have an investment thesis that is about gender equality, race equality. Well, it just has implications for AI automatically because the technology itself has those implications. Or suppose your investment thesis is related to climate. Great, AI just pertains to climate as well because of the carbon emissions, because of the water consumption. That is not inevitable, right? If we have investors that are pushing money in the right direction, we can actually, make a dent. So my advice first would be think of how your investment thesis already just implies things about AI responsibility. So these are just kind of embedded in there. So that's one point I wanted to make. Another point I want to make, which I think the core of this is already clear to impact investors, is that AI ethics or responsibility, trustworthiness, whatever you want to call it, is not necessarily cross-purpose to ROI, right? So this is a point you already know from the ESG world, for example, but it bears, it's important to see how this point is true in AI as well. What does it mean to do AI responsibly? For example, it means making sure it works for more people. Well, that's a larger customer base.
Right.
It
An
goes,
addressable market.
Yeah,
Right.
goes hand in hand with ROI, right?
Yeah.
Same for what does it mean to make it explainable? It can mean have greater, better feedback loops, so the product just works better.
So I really appreciate you saying that, and Mutali, I see you nodding too. There's a lot of agreement, which is good. Which is good.
They're great.
But to go back to your original comment and maybe building on what Ravit just said, it also it's taken a long time for even people in this room to see addressable markets that are not necessarily visible to them.
Right.
And I know from conversations we've had, that's also the case around AI, that this has a global scale and it can impact communities and individuals that we're not thinking about right now or maybe foreign to us from our lived experience.
Right.
How should we be thinking about this, or how can we size that market in the most inclusive and authentic way?
One of the things that we're really honored to do at AI for the People is that we work with a lot of Silicon Valley companies. And for years now, we're coming up to our 5th birthday, but probably for most of that time, we've worked with the FANG companies. And there's one FANG company in particular who were really thinking about the way to answer some of the critical techno research that was in the field. And they were looking for an answer to Joy Buluwimi's 2018 paper around facial recognition not recognizing dark skin. And what they did was that they engaged African-American researchers. They put out a call and other minority-based researchers to look into that research and what could be a technical social fix. The reason that they were so motivated to fund that particular body of work was that they were expanding into developing markets, and they were specifically interested in India as a potential marketplace, as well as Africa being a potential marketplaces. And the reason that they were interested in those two particular geographies is that there are so many young people relative to Europe, America, and Asia. And they decided their next $1 trillion was going to come from dark-skinned people. And what they were able to do was develop new computer vision technology that had a much, much sharper ability to do that recognition work. They embedded it into their Android, they released it, and it became the best-selling Android, not only in the US market where it was tested, but then as they were selling into developing markets as well. And that one product line is now one of their best product lines. And the reason that I bring that up were the people who were commissioning the research, the people that were in the labs, were not people from India or people from Africa. They were actually people from this area, up the road. They were not thinking about what does it mean not to be recognized by a machine. It isn't their lived reality. But because they understood that they wanted to make money for the company and they wanted to grow this product line, they were able to engage people like us and other academic researchers, other members of civil society to do that work. The same true of the US government. We were recently in a White House conversation where they were speaking about the fact that the US government is going to be doing procurement throughout Silicon Valley, particularly in the startup space, to build systems that have to be compliant with US law, have to be privacy respecting. And so through the procurement function, that was another way in which we were getting to this much more responsive technologies. You are investors. You could invest in those companies too.
Yeah. So this brings me to my first principle, and in part what I want to make sure I both have Paul, you and Ravi answer, which is, as people are heading out from this past few days of really absorbing case studies, examples, the two of you, all three of you, but the two of you are erudite thinkers and have to go through some questions that you work through every single day. what are some good questions that are, maybe as people are looking at that they should be using to filter? Am I thinking about this opportunity in AI the right way from perhaps that kind of human-centered perspective? And then maybe I'll come back to you and double-click again on the ethical perspective, or both cases. Well, you mind going first?
Yeah, well, I think if you're evaluating, whether it's you're evaluating AI services for your own organization or you're evaluating investments in, say, startups or larger companies, I think it does touch on some of the things that have already been mentioned. One, how do I know if how do I know if this works, and how will I know if something goes wrong, and is that built into the system? Seems like a basic question. Very, very important. Number two, has this been sufficiently tested? What are your testing protocols? And to Mutali's point, who's involved in that testing, right? So for example, at Salesforce, we involve outside parties, we involve our business resource groups, employees from diverse circumstances and backgrounds. We also involve, importantly, we're testing for accessibility, right, at the same time. And by the way, as a side note, AI is turbocharging accessibility. That is a hugely positive, optimistic thing that I'm super into as I'm it's part of my role at Salesforce. Yeah. But it's those sort of I guess what I'm saying these questions, but there's kind of a subtext. And the subtext is sometimes the world of conferences about AI and media about AI makes it seem like it's this big mystical thing. Yeah. But actually the questions to ask are pretty common sense. Like, how do I know this is going to work? Is it going to work for everyone? Is it going to be excluding people? Does it comply with by the way, more than 650 pieces of state-based proposed regulation in this last year? Wow. There is a clear incentive for AI to be responsible if it's going to be adopted.
Yeah, thank you. Ravit, could you add to these questions?
I have 4 questions.
4 questions.
Yeah.
It's like Passover. I love it. Let's keep going.
Yeah, I have 4 questions. When I think of ethics, what I say to investors, actually look at the governance, right? There's this tendency to go to the technical, right? Oh, let you see the data set. No. I think, first and foremost, look at the governance of the company, of the AI, and ask 4 questions. This is inspired by the NIST AI RMF, one of the most influential AI responsibility documents. But the 4 questions are, first, does the company understand its impacts? The social impacts, good and bad, and also their regulatory impacts. So understanding, first, do they understand? Second, measure. Are they measuring any of those impacts? Or even if the product works, really important, measuring before they launch, after they launch, and do they have any kind of strategy? Third, any kind of control. Are they doing anything to reduce the negative impacts? Right? Are there tracking issues? Is there a strategy? And fourth, general governance. Do they have policies? Do they have documentation? Are they talking to stakeholders?
I love it. I may, with humility, add a 5th that I have just learned from my days in philanthropy as well, which is, are they also investing in the human capacity within their organization to use this technology, to learn, to reward the people who are being need knowers, Mutali, to your good, because I think there's this idea we should invest in technology and we should invest in AI, but investing in technology and AI requires investing in the humans that are really
100%.
developing.
Yeah. People are the success mode for AI, and they're also going to be the failure mode for AI, and so it's deeply, deeply important to be investing in people.
So with our final minute, as I suggested to all of you, I consider myself an applied optimist, and I always really appreciate leaving on a note. To quote the philosopher Hannah Arendt, we're in a time of no longer and not yet, and I know some of us are anxious about this for other reasons other than just AI this week, but what is something that each of you can maybe help each of us take away in just a sentence or a thought that we should be optimistic about this new era of AI and our ability to engage in and invest in it? And I'll start with you, Rudy.
This conference actually made me really optimistic because I've been talking with investors and impact investors for a while, and I see that the curiosity about responsible AI increases, the engagement increases, and I am a firm believer of the power of impact investing to really shift the AI ecosystem.
Amazing. Thank you. Cheers.
I think what makes me optimistic is that the federal government are coming online as a procurement mechanism. That's a huge market for startups. That's a huge opportunity for investors. And their thesis is one of responsibility, because it is a national priority that the United States becomes a leader in responsible AI, and that's going to be great for this type of thinking and this type of work.
Amazing.
I was trying to choose, but I'll choose one, which is there was an amazing paper that came out last year from David Autor, an economist, who talked about how AI could help rebuild equality, help rebuild a robust middle class. And I think that is one potential outcome, if we make the right choices with AI, is that AI could act as an equalizing force, as a force for access. Yeah. And that's what makes me optimistic.
Well, I will add, with my gratitude, a note of optimism, because listening to the three of you and also knowing this amount of thoughtfulness and erudite thinking is really changing the world and making it more accessible and inclusive around AI makes me optimistic. So thank you very much, and thank you, SOCAP, for giving us this opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Backstage, we were just talking a little bit about how sometimes AI is represented in different ways, and I was just thinking, this is an all-female panel. Isn't that great? Like most, it's not usually what you see when you have AI panels. Anyway, so I am going to introduce to you someone who has an Indian take on Creole cuisine. Think of like cornbread with cardamom type of thing. And he says he can pull it off really well, but that's not why he's here. It's an honor for me to introduce Saket Soni. He's a brilliant labor leader, an award-winning organizer, and an author. As the founder and director of Resilience Force, Saket is the voice behind the rising workforce that is rebuilding communities after climate disasters, of which we have had quite a few so far this year. Named one of Fast Company's most creative people in business and the winner of the 2024 McNulty Prize, Saket is also the author of The Great Escape. But before we bring Saket to stage, we would like to show you a video about his amazing work.
Every year, we spend between $10 billion and $100 billion on disaster recovery. Tens of thousands of families sometimes spend months waiting to return home. We're going to need a 1 million-strong workforce to make every home in America resilient. The problem is that the workforce we have is mistreated, and we need far more workers than we have.
Y simplemente que se nos respetan los derechos como cualquier ser humano se merece.
We're transforming the way the United States does recovery. Hi, my name is Saket Soni, and I'm a labor organizer who spends most of his time in disaster zones. When hurricanes, floods, and fires hit, thousands of people lose their homes overnight. I represent the workers who come in and repair them. So our mandate at SOCAP this year has been to go deeper, to catalyze systems change towards a just and fair economy, a sustainable economy. And I have found a secret engine for spurring that economy. I've found a hidden lever for that systems change, and I've found it embedded in disaster zones over the last 20 years, since Hurricane Katrina, when the floodwaters turned the Gulf Coast into the world's largest construction site. I've been embedded with residents reeling from disaster and the workers rebuilding for them. And in that unlikely place, I've found this secret engine. I want to tell you about it. So to show you, let me take you deep inside a disaster. For a worm's eye view, we've just seen over the last 2 months 3 hurricanes ripped through 5 states. They've caused over $100 billion of damage. And I want to show you what a recovery looks like on the ground. So the floodwaters have receded, and now thousands of people are driving back to get to their homes. They're desperate to resume their lives, and they're in a race against time. They need thousands of workers up on their roofs, nailing down tarp into roofs. Otherwise, the next day's rain can pour into their homes and destroy thousands of dollars of property. They need workers inside their homes, repairing every room, drying out the rooms, gutting the homes, rebuilding, repairing. And if they don't do that very fast, then the disaster can be even more extensive and the repairs can be even more expensive. And it's not just the homes. You also need workers to rebuild the large-scale community infrastructure, the schools, the workplaces, the hospitals. Because after all, what good is a house to live in if you can't put your kids in the school nearby, if the school is still flooded? And how can you stay for a school if your job got washed away and there isn't another job for another 3 hours outside of your town? So, you know, the wealthy can survive these challenges. They have something of a safety net. But if you were economically vulnerable before the hurricane, then right after, if there aren't workers to drive the repairs, then you can lose your foothold and slip into poverty. So this is the first insight I want to talk to you about, an insight gained from nearly 2 decades in disaster zones. It's called the resilience divide. You know, it's commonly understood now that disasters hit different if you're poor. This is no longer a mystery. We might call them natural disasters, but they're not equal. Disasters drive the poor deeper into poverty. This is widely understood. What's less commonly understood is so do recoveries. The way we do recovery in America right now builds wealth for the wealthy. Wealthy people actually get wealthier and gain financial advantage as a result of disaster recovery. But if you're poor, recoveries drive you deeper into poverty. So for the uninsured, for the underinsured, for renters, for rural residents, for homeowners of color, for all of these communities at the center of our concern, all these communities that necessarily have to be at the center of any just and sustainable economy, for them, because of the rules of recovery in America, recovery is robbery. So back to our disaster zone. People are hanging by a thread. They're, spending their savings on hotels. They're waiting to get back to their homes. And they're not the only ones who are desperate. Everybody's under enormous pressure. Landlords, employers, mayors, governors, FEMA, the contractors. Everyone's desperate, and everyone's waiting for the workers. So, who are the workers? Well, since Hurricane Katrina, as disasters have become more frequent and destructive, a workforce has emerged that is dedicated to repairing homes and communities after hurricanes, floods, and fires. We call them the resilience workforce. They are itinerant, they're migratory, they travel from disaster to disaster, from hurricane to storm to flood to fire, repairing entire cities. Some go to 2 or 3 or 4 disasters a year. And they're doing life-saving work in appalling conditions. They're vulnerable, first of all, because most are immigrants, many of them undocumented. They live and sleep in their cars and trucks, parked in front of Home Depots across the country. They wake up, they wash themselves with bottled water. They're sent up to rooftops to do miracle work without harnesses or safety equipment. If they fall, they can die. They're often left for dead. They aren't paid very much, if they're paid at all, and all the while, they're breathing toxic mold. Now, following these workers for 20 years led me to my second insight, which is these are skilled professionals. Most people looking at these workers might see unskilled day laborers, but in fact, Over the course of 20 years, these workers have accumulated an enormous amount of skill and craft. I was actually just in a van with a crew load of them driving from Louisiana to Florida after Hurricane Milton, and the leader of that crew told me he was driving into his 18th hurricane. His 18th hurricane. And craft and skill isn't all they've accumulated. They've also accumulated a deep sense of commitment. These workers have an extraordinary sense of vocation around bringing people home. They have become the white blood cells of America's climate recovery, and they know it and they're proud of it. Thank you. One more thing about them is there's not nearly enough of them. So this was brought home to me one night in rural Louisiana after a hurricane slammed into the state. I met 400 workers who were rebuilding a public school. They hadn't been paid in weeks. They were furious with their contractor. Some hadn't eaten in days and they were falling down. And so I went all the way up to the contracting chain, the top of the contracting chain, and I found the CEO of a major multi-million-dollar disaster restoration company. I was expecting a fight. Instead, I found a friend. The CEO needed those workers to be paid. He needed the work to continue. And beyond that, he needed many more workers to work around the Gulf Coast. And so we partnered. We solved the workers' problem. We got them paid. But we went beyond that. We recruited thousands of workers. We're training them now. And we're increasing wages and working conditions in the industry so that they can stay in these jobs. And so this brings me to my third insight, which is, as a result of the intensity, the frequency, the destructiveness of these disasters since Hurricane Katrina, with billions of dollars pouring in taxpayer money and insurance money to repair damaged property, resilience has become an entire economy. And in the middle of this economy, there is a massive demand for workers because someone has to do the repairs. Since Hurricane Katrina, we've seen almost $300 billion disasters. That's disasters that have caused $1 billion of damage or more. And we can take this resilience economy and we can leverage the need for workers, the demand, and turn it into a basis for good, family-supporting, long-term jobs and careers. We can turn the resilience economy into an engine for justice, dignity, and sustainability, for high wages and better outcomes for workers and communities. And so these three insights have driven us into the project that we're in the center of now. We are organizing workers and employers across America in disaster-prone states, in every zip code where there's a disaster or a disaster might come. And we're translating all of this community engagement and turning it into a 1 million-strong workforce for America in the climate era. 1 million workers in the resilience workforce. At the core of this project is our central innovation, which is a new occupation for the climate era. We're calling it the Certified Climate Resilience Technician. Climate resilience technicians aren't just immigrants. They're people in local communities. And they're not just working after disasters. They're working year-round to make homes and schools and communities adaptive before the disaster and stronger placed to face the storms that might come in the future. When disasters occur, these workers are migrating to hotspots in their region to rebuild. Now, every American era has seen the rise of new economies, and every new economy has needed a new kind of professional. Agriculture, manufacturing, the digital economy, information, finance, all of these new industries led to new kinds of workers. Our new workers, the certified climate resilience technicians, are going to become the auto workers of the climate era, people deep at the heart of American economies and part of the spine of the American middle class. And we're proving that we can leverage this labor demand into the high wages to make that happen. In Louisiana, after the pandemic, the entire service industry shut down, and lots of service workers lost their jobs. The jobs they lost paid them $7.25 an hour, the federal minimum wage. We retrained them into resilience work, and they started their resilience careers at $24 an hour. That's real. Across the Gulf Coast, we are training new workers, and we've now attached high labor standards, good wages, and safe conditions to nearly $500 million in public contracts. And here in California, we're taking residents who have jobs as farm workers, and in those farms, they're earning $17.50 an hour at best. Farm work is dwindling because of climate change. Harvest seasons are getting less and less, and these workers need a next economy. We've retrained those workers, and they're starting their careers here at $34 an hour, making their homes and communities fire resilient. So that's what we're doing, but we're also building a new kind of resilience framework. We're rewriting the rules of recovery and resilience so that it can be a driver of prosperity, not poverty. So across America, there are estimated to be 10 million homes at flood risk. We're going door to door to residents in those flood zones, and we're engaging them around their own expertise of what to do and building workforces in their communities. We're making sure that public dollars and this workforce and all the political will around it are pointed not just at the homes of the wealthy, but at affordable housing stock to overcome the resilience divide. And we're doing one more thing. You know, we all know that we are in a very precarious time, and to build the just and sustainable economy we want depends not just on a workforce, not just on labor demand, not just on the presence of economies that can be scaled. It also depends on democracy. For a just and sustainable economy, we need to build a healthy democracy. And to build a healthy democracy, we need to build bonds and trust between people who may not be used to working together or even talking to each other. So we work deep in red states, in Florida, in Louisiana, in the South. And hurricane after hurricane, I watch as immigrant workers arrive to repair the homes of residents who, right before the hurricane, thought of those immigrants as the enemy. And solving practical problems together, rebuilding a home together, rebuilding a town together, builds connections, builds spontaneous bonds. Our work is to turn those spontaneous bonds into long-lasting friendships and relationships. So I want to leave you with one last story. In the Florida Panhandle, one night after a hurricane ripped through an unincorporated town, an older gentleman stepped out of the house and saw nothing but a sea of darkness. He was scared, he was alone. He sat in his washed-out house and he wrote up a sign. He put it on his front door. It said, "Strangers will be shot. Strangers will be shot." Well, when it was daylight, we arrived there, a band of strangers, me and an entire crew of immigrant workers. And we rebuilt that man's house, and after we did, we had dinner with him, we built a friendship, and after that, he took down that sign. So this workforce is building not just homes, but hope. Just what the doctor ordered for our economy and our democracy. Thank you very much. I hope you'll join us. Thank you.
Well, can we tell that SOCAP is an organizer or what? How many of you wanted to stand up and stomp your feet and cheer? I was backstage doing exactly that. SOCAP reminded us that we all know disasters hit unequally, but did we know that recovery makes the rich richer and the poor poorer? That will sit with me for weeks to come. And then he left us with hope. But what if disasters can instead be turned into engines for justice, job creation, and sustainability? Thank you, SOCAP. It's my privilege now to introduce Dr. Cecilia Conrad, a trailblazing leader in philanthropy and the founder and CEO of Lever for Change. Under her leadership, Lever for Change has distributed over $2.2 billion to tackle some of the world's most pressing challenges, from racial and gender inequality to climate change. A former leader of the MacArthur Fellows Program and an emerita professor of economics at Pomona College, Cecilia has been recognized as one of the 50 most powerful women in philanthropy by Forbes. I'm not sure, though, whether SOCAP has been able to deliver to Cecilia what she knows San Francisco for. When she was in graduate school, she used to travel up here to buy cake and to dance in the discos. Cecilia, maybe the after party will give you just what you've been looking for. And interviewing Cecilia tonight, we have David Bank. I'm sure most of you already know David Bank, but for those who don't, he's the editor and CEO of Impact Alpha, a media platform that serves investors and entrepreneurs seeking to outperform the positive social and environmental impact. Before Impact Alpha, he had a 20-year career in newspapers. Raise your hand if you know what a newspaper is. Back when there were newspapers. I know that I keep up to date on the industry on a regular basis by skimming the brief from Impact Alpha most mornings. Most of you probably do also. Please welcome to the SOCAP stage, David and Cecilia.
Greetings, agents of impact. I want to thank you, Katie, and thank you to the Sorensen folks, and thank you to SOCAP. Impact Alpha traces its own origin story to SOCAP, so it's a little bit heady to be here on the stage with all of you, but here we are. So, Cecilia, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you.
Same here.
We're going to get to Levers for Change in a moment, but for 10 years, you were charged with making the cold calls to the MacArthur geniuses and telling them by surprise that they had just won something like $850,000. What was that like?
It's one of the coolest jobs in the world. You know, I had come to that job from being a college dean where a lot of my work was saying no. And here, people, you don't have to say no, you're just calling them up and giving them this news. And it was always fun because some people would answer the phone, and I remember one particular fellow answered the phone and was angry because he was having issue with the cable company, and he thought we were the cable company. And so we had this grumpy noise, and so we always begin with, excuse me, I'm Cecilia Conrad. Are you someplace where you can have a confidential conversation? Which sounds suspicious, and so you get a little awkwardness there. And it's just, and then the moment when you tell them we've had tears, we've had these funny stories of revelation of, oh my, I have some money that I didn't have before. We had someone who was in a cab, and he was going out to dinner with his girlfriend, and he stopped the cab and he said, wait a moment, we're gonna go to a more expensive restaurant. So it's amazing.
But it's interesting because Levers for Change is actually a different model. So there, nobody knew they were getting anything, and in Levers for Change, folks have been working hard and applying, and so you flip
very different models. What they have in common, though, is the notion that there is creativity out there that needs to be discovered and enabled, and they share that commitment. The Fellows Program is well known for its secrecy. We rely on nominations. What people probably don't know, though, is the reach of those nominations. Each month, we invite about 200 new people to nominate. So we're relying quite a bit on the expertise that isn't inside of the foundation, but outside the foundation to guide that selection process. What we found in that case is that if you want people to really take some risk in their nominations, it helps to have the kind of veil of secrecy around it. In Lever for Change, instead, again, we're open. We're trying to encourage ideas from outside of the foundation, from outside of whatever the individual funder staffing looks like. We're also relying on expertise, outside expertise. We put together these panels of evaluators. Perhaps some of you have been on panels to read those proposals and give feedback. But again, the goal is to convey agency and resources to those people who have some great ideas about how to solve the problems so that they can get to work and solve them.
So it started with 100 and change from MacArthur Foundation, and that did not have a specific.
Yes, that was as open as you could get.
That was as open as you could get. So you were just looking for good ideas to solve a big problem with $100 million.
That's correct. $100 million, any problem, anywhere. We were open to for-profits and nonprofits anywhere in the globe.
And the first winner of that was very interesting.
Collaboration, yes, between Sesame Workshop, as in Big Bird, and the International Rescue Committee. And one could say, okay, these are two big, well-known organizations. Really, did you have to do a big open call to get that? But the idea that they came forward with, that there needed to be an intervention to help the youngest victims of displacement, refugee crises that was particularly happening. Their initial focus was the Syrian refugee region. Because once somebody's been displaced, they're probably going to be displaced for 20-some years. So that means that those young children are going to be in a new environment. They've suffered an incredible trauma, and we wanted to set them on a path that gave them the best chance of success in that new environment. So it was a really interesting idea and a collaboration between two organizations that hadn't worked together before. The result is there's a television show now called Ahilan Simpson, Welcome Sesame. It's got specially created Muppets that were developed in the local communities. And then there was a program of supporting parents, both inside of refugee camps and who had already moved into urban areas, with help to help them support their youngest children. First sets of evaluations of the program are really strong. There are lots of indicators that it's working.
And so now, though, it's spun out of MacArthur, and each contest, I don't know if you call it a contest, but each has its own sectoral focus. So are you kind of the X Prize of social causes?
Not quite. I mean, we have some similarities, but in the sense that I think both of us are trying to really solve big problems. X Prize is designed to reward organizations who hit certain targets. It's usually very technology-driven, and it sort of gives you the prize once you've done the thing. Lever for Change is addressing a different set of problems that don't necessarily lend themselves to predefined metrics. In fact, one of our core principles is that applicants tell us what metrics they should be assessed by. How are they going to solve the problem? And then we fund the work to get to that solution.
I was kind of interested in the journey from the Genius grants to the Levers for Change, because Mackenzie Scott also, I think, people would get a call, or they might have had a little hint that Bridgespan had nosed around a little bit, but the call would come and they would get the prize without having applied for it. But now they've changed, and you have a gig with Mackenzie Scott.
We were able last year to help the Scott and the Yield Giving team to offer another approach to their grant making. Before, they did quiet research and they would do due diligence. Like you said, it seems a little bit like the Fellows Program, but they wanted to create a pathway for organizations to apply, to make sure they were particularly interested in smaller organizations. So we ran the Yield Giving Open Call, which was for organizations with budgets between 1 and 5 million, so small-ish, not the smallest, but small-ish. And one of the things that was really exciting about it is their initial commitment was that they were going to give out $250 $1 million awards. The pool was so rich and wonderful that in the end, They gave out $640 million total to 361 organizations. And they were and this is the other part, most of those organizations got 2 million instead of 1.
So I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but in my newspaper career, one of my beats was philanthropy, and I think the takeaway from several years of covering that was philanthropy is broken. And I got very exercised about the 5% payout rule, which many folks will know, and I was like, you can't be serious, 5%? So this is, you're part of a kind of reimagining or renewing of philanthropy, I think.
We are. Part of the motivation for creating Lever for Change was that we could observe that there was kind of a market failure happening. We had, on the one hand, we've had this incredible growth in wealth, right? And happily, some of the people who've gotten extremely wealthy want to share those riches. They want to do good things. But when you talk to them, they say, it's so overwhelming. I don't have time because I'm still earning my wealth. There's an information problem between the two. And on the other hand, there are all these organizations who have great ideas and could do a lot, but they don't have the philanthropic capital. So we were set up in a way to try and help address that. We wanted to work with individual funders, and we have. We've also worked, though, with big institutions like Kellogg and Lego and so on, some of whom I think are in the room, to help to fill that, to solve that information asymmetry through this open call process and through a rigorous process that mobilizes expertise that's beyond what any individual donor will have on their staff, or even a foundation will necessarily have on their staff.
One of the things that comes up, and it's not just, frankly, in philanthropy, it's actually in the fundraising world, any folks who have been trying to raise money, is there's many more no's than there are yeses. And so you have a rigorous process, and the winner is off to the races. And meanwhile, hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants have spent many, many hours, and they go home without the prize.
And so there's a tension here, and the tension is between the desire to be open, and when you're open, it means that you're trying to bring organizations who are not well known in the philanthropic community, the program officer doesn't know, the foundation doesn't know, so you need to provide enough information to persuade the funding to go out. And we recognize that early on. That means there's a burden, there's an application process. We've tried to build the application and create it so that it creates value add even for the organizations. We've had organizations say that doing the application kind of helped them solidify what would we do if we really had enough funding. We also provide feedback to every one of the organizations that applies. But then those that end up near the top in our challenges, we have a commitment to. They become part of our Bold Solutions Network, and you can go on our website and you can peruse some of those great projects and proposals. We support those organizations with opportunities for learning, we try to uplift them and get them in front of funders in different communities. We've had a panel this morning with some of our Bold Solutions Network members. And the goal is to bring in additional funding. And one of the things I'm incredibly proud of about what we've done is that we mentioned the $2.2 billion in the introduction. Almost half of that is not from the donor who sponsored a competition. It's from the other donors who've supported other organizations that we identified through that process.
So does it work? I think the second winner the next year in 100 for Change was Community Solutions, looking for solutions to homelessness. Homelessness still exists. All in on big, bold solutions and enough money, but what are you finding in
Well, what we're
terms of
finding
results?
across the challenges, I mean, some of these awards are still fairly new. So let's take Community Solutions for an example. This is a project that works with cities, counties, local government entities to create a data infrastructure. It's called the by name data infrastructure that has been proven to work in some cities to help reduce chronic homelessness. So there's still homelessness, but it's shorter duration and less likely to have recidivism in that space. And it has shown progress. The Detroit announced a year ago a big reduction in their veteran homeless population. It is not a fast solution. Solutions rarely are, and that's one of the great things about The challenges we run is that donors make multi-year significant commitments, and they also recognize that you need patience and to give organizations the opportunity to pivot.
Yeah. I think you just opened up the Global Women's Health Challenge with something like $250 million at stake from Melinda Gates?
Yes, one of Melinda French Gates' commitments in terms of her work on empowering women is going to be an open call. We announced it a couple of weeks ago, so you can go to the website, the Action for Women's Health Open Call.
And
yes.
you told me that you haven't gotten too many because they all come in right at the...
Yeah, applications always come at the end, but you have to register first, so if you're interested, you need to go and take a look.
All right, so $250 million out there for global women's health. And then another one that's coming up that's interesting is, I think Reid Hoffman put up some money, may have not escaped your attention. There's an election coming up, I think, for restoring trust in democracy.
Yes, and this is restoring trust in institutions of democratic society. We're going to launch that sometime after the election.
And what do you and what kinds of things do you think might emerge?
You know, it's what's exciting about this is that they are being very open about how you identify what are the critical institutions. I'm expecting we'll have some things around the news media. I suspect we'll have some things around government, both local, state, and federal. There may be some proposals that have to do restoring trust in higher education, in science. I think there's so many features. I mean, what we've seen in studies recently is there's even a decline in trust in nonprofits.
Yeah. Cecilia, if you want to see her glammed up with makeup, you pick up the new issue of Town and Country, the philanthropy issue, and she's got a whole photo spread there. But just how do you...
You have the white hair and the glasses, but you won't recognize the rest of me.
How do you keep, I've just been struck, how do you keep your energy up?
So I've always been kind of an upbeat person, and I realize it's because I've had a charmed life. And some of it has to do with just when I was born. I was born in 1955, so you can do the math, big birthday coming up, right after Brown versus Board of Education. So there were educational opportunities that wouldn't have existed for people before me. And I timed it just right that I kind of got to college and came on the labor market really at the peak of the enforcement of the Equal Employment Opportunity laws. In fact, my graduate school education was the result of a big settlement between the EEOC and AT&T. They paid for my graduate education. And so every moment I had these doors that were open that had been closed in the past. And one of the things that I was raised by my parents and the community I was in is that conveys a certain responsibility to keep those doors open, keep pushing them open where they're closed, and that keeps me energized, particularly at this moment in time where there's an effort to close them again. Good. So I got to keep going because I got to keep those doors open.
So keep those doors open. Cecilia, it's a pleasure.
Thank you
you all.
Thank you so much, Cecilia.
Woo! What an inspiring and powerful and hopeful session. Who else here wants to have Cecilia Conrad call them to tell them they're a fellow now and they're going to receive millions to support their work? I do. Now remember the video that Stefan Jacobs showed earlier of young people jumping. We want to get there. I know we need to shake it off. It's been an intense few days, a fruitful few days. We're going to get the energy high and the rhythms alive. Please join me in welcoming Batteria Batuki, a vibrant collective of cultural ambassadors and teaching artists. They bring us a fusion of powerful beats and community activism. Get ready to move and celebrate SOCAP 2024 with Batteria Batuki.
Hello.
Mike.
How you guys doing? I'm gonna need a little help.
Mike.
Check 1 2. Check 1 2. Hello. Keep it going, keep that clap going. We're exchanging energy right now. My name is Pedro, and I'm with my family right here, Batuki. Whether you're a music lover or not, you can't deny the fact that music is a huge part of like social movement. It's oftentimes the narration to cultural movements, social movements, our memories.
Me dancing.
And so the drum is what does it for us. Born right here in San Francisco's Mission District, the drum, these rhythms, the stories of over hundreds of years are the legacy that we continue to share. We started in 2020, I think during COVID. We brought our drums out to the parks. We had classes. We brought people together. And you can't deny that during a global pandemic, music brings joy. It brings people together. So I want us to celebrate our collective joy, our collective resilience together today. Again, thank you for having us out here. Batuki, the music keeps pushing. The drums is the fire that keeps us moving. Thank you so much. But before we go, I need to give a big shout out to the whole SOCAP team. So I want everybody to come up on stage. I want everybody to join us. Come on. Everybody come on stage right now. You got to move with us. There we go. Everybody come up on stage. We're going to celebrate that hard work. I need you guys to rock with us. There we go. Cha, cha, cha. Moro mi mai, yo. Moro mi mai, yo. Alada, yo. Moro mi mai, yo. Oro mi mayo alada yo.
Thank you so much. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Mike to Michelle, hey! Thank you so much for this amazing 3 days. I want to hear a round of applause for this side. Please, no, higher, higher. For the sleepless nights, for calling those speakers 100 times until they would answer, for everyone who was printing things until 2 in the morning, for everyone on this side who has been running around and has probably put in 20,000 steps a day. And a special thank you for one of the most incredible leaders I know, a person whose quiet leadership has enabled us, has created a platform for all of this team to thrive. The person that has created all of this beautiful creative space for us to create this content for you, this experience, this community. I know you're out there, Robert, hiding in your beautiful, quiet leadership. Robert Munson, please, everyone, give him a round of applause. Of course, our partners, I know you're all there. Logos are out there, but they don't even represent half of what you've done for us. Because when we say partners, we mean true partnership. That means elevating each other's voices, finding ways to open more doors for those who have not had a chance to speak or get heard. Thank you so much to all of our partners. Please, one more round of applause, and then I promise you we'll dance.